think about patriotism. But what does that look like in practice? This is an important question normally. Now, this is the question that Robert Greenway, veteran soldier, Matan Peleg, who is the president of the most important national movement, and Gadi, Taub, author, and Attila, Kovács, who is the EU research director of the Fundamental Rights Center. Please welcome them on stage.
Welcome, everyone. Gentlemen, please take a seat. Welcome on stage, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. We've been discussing issues on Israel for some minutes now, and let me start with Gadi. You gave some very insightful thoughts regarding the relationship between woke and democracy. So let's spice up the audience. Could you please elaborate a little bit more about this relationship of woke and democracy?
Yes, first of all, it's a pleasure to be at CPAC Hungary, and thanks for inviting us. Whenever you speak for a reform, a democratic reform in Israel, they say, oh, you represent Orban, you want a dictatorship here. And the fact is that Israel is not really democracy now, it is ruled by judges. And if you look at what's going on generally in the West, you see the same phenomenon, and it's not a coincidence that it's judges. Judges are also advancing the hegemony of the European Union without the consent of governments and peoples behind the scenes. And I think since the ideology of the current version of liberalism, the woke version of liberalism, is necessarily anti-democratic, because in their view of the world, the thing that creates friction and war is nationalism. And so they are out to combat nationalism. That's a wrong interpretation of history, because wars erupt when you try to suppress nationalism, not when you let people exercise their self-determination. And so the enemy in their view is nationalism, but the publics in nation states, the citizens, are national and want to preserve nationalism. So the international progressive movement is not just anti-national, as it says, it's necessarily anti-democratic, because it has to advance its globalist agenda against the will of citizens in Israel and in Europe, and indeed in the United States.
Matan, we have heard about this ideological conflict, and if we take a look at the current political situation in Israel, we see this conflict also in light of the judiciary that you mentioned. How is the situation now in Israel in political terms?
Well, I think that the situation in Israel now is a little bit like what happened in the United States after Donald Trump won. What we saw from the left in the United States is, how I will call it, total football. In the minute that Donald Trump won the election, the left just was furious, was angry. We saw anarchism in the streets. We saw violence of demonstrations. This is exactly the same method is now in Israel. This is, by the way, why Donald Trump lost, in my opinion, in the United States, because people that loved him and loved the values that he used and spoke it in his speeches still were afraid of the leftist craziness in the streets. And you saw it very much on media. In Israel, it's now the same. A day after the election, a day after the Likud won, Benjamin Netanyahu won, the left went to the streets, every time with a different excuse, and this is what we are seeing now.
So it seems there is like a leftist political recipe against the democratically elected leaders like Donald Trump or Benjamin Netanyahu. You mentioned that 6 days ago you gave a very powerful speech on the streets of Jerusalem in a pro-government political movement and mass parade. How was it? How many people were present on the streets?
Well, came almost 500,000 people.
500,000?
Yes, and it was amazing. It's amazing experience to be on a stage where you don't see the end of the crowd. And by the way, my speech was all about why are we here? We are here because we want a Jewish democratic state, a democratic state. And the people chose this way of the country. Now what we are seeing is the cultural elite and the judges and the media is totally against it. Okay, so the people won in a democratic way, in a legitimate way, but the elite don't accept it, and that's it. It's what, like Gadi said, and then it's suddenly you don't have a democracy anymore. Now, the biggest problem, and I think all over the world, is that what is the story with the conservatives? Conservative people want to conceive. They want a country, a healthy country, and that's it. It's you are a conservative of Hungary. It's Hungary first, and for Americans it's America first, and for Israel it's Israel first. So we don't want to burn the country everywhere. The left is exactly the opposite. They see them, they're globalists. So they don't want America first or Jewish state or Hungary with strong borders. They want a global something. And although it doesn't succeed everywhere, but this is really the fight. So you have leftists, people who they don't care, they're willing to burn it all, and you have the tolerate right who just want to conceive their own country. So there is a battle not only between ideas, but also in ideologies and approach. But I believe the truth will win because we don't have a choice. We are more tolerate, the right is more tolerate. And because we feel the responsibility, but from the other hand, we have our limits. Don't touch our kids. Don't touch our future.
Very important point.
Yes. So we also have our limit, and this thing will not disappear. So we are willing to go further, but we will not lose the war because we don't have any other choice.
Robert, let's talk a little bit about the broader context in the Middle East from a security perspective. You personally played a very important role in the Abraham Accords, and for the signing ceremony, Hungary was the only EU member state to be invited. How is now the situation, the security issue in the Middle East? How do you see Israel's surroundings in this regard?
Well, thanks for the question, and thanks for the opportunity to be here and to join the panel discussion. I'd say first, too, that the issues are somewhat related. I think there's a general perception that events that are going on inside Israel, whether it's Israeli judicial reform and the politics associated with it, or whether it's friction between the Israelis and Palestinians, and that, I think, often is seen as the principal cause of instability in and amongst those people that inhabit the Middle East. The reality is, if you talk to people in the Middle East, you talk to the leadership of the countries, Accord members, and others, you get a different story. The thing that they're most concerned about with, I think logically, is the threat emanating from Iran, which encompasses broad constellations, but of late their radical pursuit by all, I think, standard measures of the potential to develop a nuclear weapon. This, I think, occupies the very forefront of their consciousness and their concern and their right, I think, to share it. And in that, I think they're concerned with both Israel and the United States, often seen as the only break or constraint against Israel or Iranian aggression in the region and the pursuit of a nuclear weapon. They're concerned about the degree to which the United States and Israel, under the current circumstances, are able to actively thwart the greatest threat to regional peace and stability. And it's also no accident that Hungary was invited to the ceremony and continues to play a prominent role in supporting and strengthening the Abraham Accords, and recently, to its credit, established a parliamentary group to support and assist the caucus. And it's also, I think, no mistake, we'll talk about it, I think, later, why there's tangible benefits to be derived from the agreement itself. It's more than just peace, which deserves support in and of itself, but there's also a self-interest here and an economic benefit for both members and for European countries, including Hungary.
Matan, we discussed, and also this was a good example, that Hungary was the only EU member state to stand up for the agenda of Israel. Could you elaborate, could you talk about a little bit what Hungary means for Israel in this regard? If we see European politics, we see many times that European institutions are condemning Israel in its local conflict. How do you see this question?
Well, we got used to the fact that the European Union always condemns us and always is against us.
You don't seem too much disappointed about it.
But I will give you a personal story, but I think a lot of Israelis felt it. I think since the disengagement in 2005, since Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip, almost in average every year or two, we are calling it Sevev Lechima, a battle round between the terror organizations and Israel. Every year or two, it's the shootings are dropping almost all day, almost all the year. But once in a while, it's like a massive round. Okay, and we got used to it. You know what? We got used to it. It's like the Australians have sharks and America have hurricanes, and we have terror organizations. You know, everyone.
Can you really get used to it?
Huh?
Can you really get used to it? It's part of life.
Everyone with his natural disasters.
Okay.
But
I know what it is for Hungary. Yeah. Opposition.
and you got used to the fight. But in 2021, the battle round was a little bit different than all the others. Why? Because it wasn't only from Gaza Strip. It wasn't only the Hamas. We had also riots from within, from Arabs that support, that are against Israel as a Jewish state. They support Palestinian Authority. They want Israel to be erased. And it's a fifth column. It's from inside. So it was different, okay? The round in 2021 was different for a lot of Israelis because we want Arabs in Israel to integrate. We don't want second class, other class. So we were surprised of this approach from within. And then the Europeans come and they condemned us. And we were like, what is going on? This is like really apocalypse. We are getting they are shooting on us. We are having it now from within, and now you are against us. And then Viktor Orban came. And he was against the European willing to condemn us, and because of that, they didn't how do you say it? They were not against us. They didn't veto it. Viktor Orban vetoed it. And for us, it was a ray of light. It was very surprising.
Very powerful message. Yeah.
It was a very powerful message because only in the, when do you know who is your friend? When you are alone. A lot of people say, I support Israel, but I support your rights, but. And Viktor Orban, in this situation, was for Israel. He vetoed for us. And this was an amazing experience.
Robert, you mentioned already the economic consequences and the economic framework in light of security and stability. What aspects do you consider the most important one, including energy, for example, which is a very hot topic now in Europe in light of the Russian aggression on Ukraine?
It's a great question, maybe the question. And ultimately, like the premise, among other things, behind the Accords was to integrate our partners and allies in the region more effectively for their benefit and for our interests. But it was a recognition that the economic component of it was essential. Peace had been made with Egypt in '79, with Jordan in '94. And significant investment has gone since, and it's mostly a security relationship that exists between the three, which is vital and important, but it never matured to the level, I think, of which the expectation was there. It was often referred to as a cold peace. We deliberately sought something different, and the economic relationship we thought was a rationale you would defend and secure. So if we trade together, I would defend and protect it, and so the rationale was a little bit different, and deliberately so. And that is important because it's the bond that holds the Accord member countries together and withstands the diplomatic and the political and the security threats that are against it. The same, though, holds for external support. There is a derivative benefit, not just for the United States, but also for European and Asian partners. And if you think about it, the logic is that the Middle Eastern countries, the region itself and the Accord member countries sit between Europe and Asian markets. They sit between North American and Asian markets as well, and the information, hardware, and infrastructure that sustains the global economy. All of that is vital to our interests. To see it done more efficiently, securely, and less costly is in all of our interests. And so to have that within the hands and within the control of our partners and allies working together makes great sense. To energy specifically, since certainly the Russian invasion of Ukraine has disrupted global food markets and has also disrupted European energy requirements, in our minds, the Accords member countries have a unique contribution to make to European energy needs. Could they replace all of the 41.5% of European natural gas coming from Russia? It's a hypothetical. Could they offset it significantly? There's no question. It's more than a maritime delivery. The infrastructure is required. I think this is an opportunity to strategically realign our European partners and our Middle Eastern partners, not our adversaries, no adversary dependence. And it could meet obvious economic needs, but it would change the nature of the way Europe and the Middle East look at each other. Instead of becoming critics, you become customers, you become partners. And I think that's in, everyone's interest.
Gadi, we talked about woke. How can Israel and Hungary fight against this ideological stream that is coming from the liberal media, liberal countries? I mean, both the Israeli and the Hungarian government share the same values of pro-family, anti-migration, Hungary and Israel first policies. How can we fight jointly against this liberal agenda?
Yes, I think the alliance is very, very fruitful. We face the same kinds of problem, and these two countries, Israel and Hungary, are really at the forefront of defending nationalism. But as I said, by defending nationalism, they are also defending democracy. So they are on the side of self-determination. And also we face the same problems in different guises. In our case, it's an internal court. If you think Laszlo Solyom was a radical activist judge, then you haven't seen Aaron Barak. We are actually ruled by judges. In Israel, the legal advisors to the government can veto policy of ministers. We are no longer a democracy. You are facing a different threat from Brussels, but it's also conducted through the language of the law. And the whole rule of law controversy that Hungary has, Article 7.
That would be another panel, but carry on.
It is the same kind of problem. And one thing I think we can learn from Hungary, at least our right-wing government should learn from Hungary, is that it's not enough to win electoral politics. If you leave the other centers of power, academia, the press, and especially the courts, in the hands of leftist hegemony, then you can't win the war. And you know how it is with the left. When they have a monopoly on something and you try to get one conservative judge into the Israeli court, they call it politicization. So the Israeli
Double
court
standard.
represents a party that did not pass the threshold to get into parliament. We are ruled by judges belonging to an ideology that couldn't get voted into our parliament. So we are in a really extreme state in this struggle over the reform.
Gentlemen, we have 3 minutes left, 1 minute to each of you. How can Hungary help Israel in the global and European political arena? What are the most important issues that a very committed country like Hungary could help Israel?
Well, first of all, I think, unfortunately, the European Union and Germany and other European governments invest a lot of money in propaganda NGOs in Israel that really tries to change us from within. And they have tons of money and an enormous budget that comes from foreign governments. And this is something that, by the way, Hungary will never do, will never give money to NGOs in a different country to try to change it, because conservatives are not doing it to one each other. I respect you and you respect me, and this is why we have peace. This is all about. So I think as long as Hungary will stay such a strong country with borders, with all the values that it represents, and Israel will stay also like this, then more nations will see how it works, and it will spread.
Thank you. Gadi, how can Hungary help Israel in this fight?
First of all, by actual support. Since there is
Thank you very much.
veto in the European Union, we rely on you, and we just had a left-wing government who tried to find favor with the progressive side of Europe. Thankfully, Netanyahu is back, and I'll just say this. When I saw a picture of Viktor Orban all smiles with Netanyahu's biography, I relaxed.
Robert, the final, you can applaud. The final word is yours.
So I would say it's more even than an issue of how Hungary can help Israel. So I think you can help each other. And I think in this case, you can demonstrate the positive benefits and the pursuit of practical policies for self-interest here. And I think that there's a way for Hungary to demonstrate the positive benefits of pursuing a stronger relationship with Israel on an economic as well as on a security and a diplomatic level. All levels can be improved. And I think with the Accord member countries as a platform, it's a weird juxtaposition when there's a conflict in Europe, a land war in Europe, and there's peace, the burgeonings of peace between Israel and its neighbors in the Middle East. We never would have expected this sort of a circumstance, but here we are. And I think we can leverage this circumstance, and I think Hungary can play a leadership role in demonstrating the positive benefits of peace in the Middle East and how that could be transferred to beneficiaries in Europe.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention. We will continue certainly this conversation. Thank you for being here on the stage of CPAC Hungary 2023. Thank you.